Keeneland, every moment matters.
Welcome to another edition of the Thoroughbred Daily News Writers Room podcast. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the TDN. Hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving.
I did. Hope everybody else did. I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports and the Buyers Speed Figure team.
And TD Thornton filling in for Zoe Cadman today. I'm speaking to you from a little bit north of Boston. I'm a correspondent, along with Bill, at Thoroughbred Daily News.
All right, guys. Well, it was one of the last big weekends of the year, but certainly between Churchill Downs and Del Mar, we have a lot to talk about because both of them had a lot of very interesting stakes races run over the Thanksgiving weekend. So why don't we just one by one go through the ones that kind of were the bigger stories? And I think we should start with the Clark on Friday at Churchill Downs, won by Magnitude. And, this is a horse that to me was always looking to break out. I mean, he put up huge numbers in the Rising Star and the Iowa Derby. Then he was a total flop in the Travers, but you just kept thinking that sooner or later he's going to win that big one and he's going to be the type of horse that, kind of lived up to his potential. He faced a good field in the Clark. He won by a half length over Hit Show as the favorite. He had a very good trip, no doubt about that. Randy, what did you think of Magnitude in the Clark?
Yeah, he had a very good trip because he's got the tactical speed to give himself good trips. And I think the thing that stood out to me was what we saw in the Pennsylvania Derby, where he was unusually far back for him, and yet he finished very well the last part of it, which surprised a lot of people. That was not a mirage, because what we saw in the Clark was more of the same. Chunk of Gold sprinted out to the lead. How tough of a customer is he now with those blinkers now that he's setting the pace? Magnitude relaxed beautifully to his outside. Chunk of Gold was a tough customer for Magnitude to get past, but he eventually did get past him. And I think it points out that Magnitude should have a bright future next year as a 4-year-old.
Yeah, I thought the way that Magnitude was tracking Chunk of Gold, I thought he was just going to blow by him on the far turn. And Chunk of Gold hung in there a lot better than I expected him to do. I believe he was like 13-1 in the betting. Wow. And Magnitude was breathing right down his neck there. So he gave him a bit more of a run for his money. In fact, I think Chunk of Gold came back and led between calls late in the lane. Magnitude was able to power past. Coming out of the Pennsylvania Derby, interesting to note, that's not been a productive race so far. 7 horses previously had run back out of that race. None of them had won. In fact, 4 were beaten favorites, including a couple who had taken precipitous drops down in class. And don't forget, Magnitude had that ankle chip removed after he ran the big number. He was 43-1 when he won the Rising Star Stakes. He won it by over 9 lengths, and he had to have some time off there. Came back and won again by a big margin, almost 10 lengths in the Iowa Derby. He was a no-impact third in the Travers. Came from far back, as Randy said, to be second in the Pennsylvania Derby. No next stated race for Magnitude, according to Steve Asmussen. He'll winter at the fairgrounds, and he was the first 3-year-old to win the Clark since the Steve Asmussen trained and Winchell owned Gunrunner back in 2016.
And having said everything that TD and I just said about Magnitude, I don't think he was the best horse. I mean, Hit Show finishes second, beaten just a half length. And because Magnitude is a 3-year-old, Hit Show was spotting him 7 pounds, 125 to 118, and was digging in at the end. I mean, Hit Show, of course, won the Dubai World Cup. He still hasn't won a Grade 1 race in the United States. This was as close as he's come. But given the weight carry discrepancy, I think at least that Hit Show was the best horse.
All right, so let's turn our attention to Churchill Downs, where Bob Baffert was very involved in the racing there on the Stars of the Future card. I always enjoy that card, the all 2-year-old cards they run right after Thanksgiving, because you see some good horses, and you also see some horses usually that you look for down the road and kind of break through. The Ed Brown Stakes was the Zidane-owned Baffert-trained Boyd. $1.05 million purchase. Has Emmer Zidane ever spent less than $1 million on a horse? The man certainly has deep pockets, but he comes up with good horses. And this is no doubt is a very good horse. He looked pretty good winning in this race by 2.5 lengths. I know there was only 4 horses in the field, but it wasn't a bad field. There was a couple other pretty nice horses in there. But my question, TD, is his future as a sprinter Or can Baffert get this guy to stretch out and maybe turn him into a legitimate Derby contender? So there's question one for you. And question two would just be your general impressions of Boyd and the Ed Brown.
So question one, I don't have the crystal ball fired up, especially not looking 6 months in advance from now to see where he might fit in with the Triple Crown. He's only been raced twice, 5.5 furlongs and 6.5 furlongs. I couldn't get a good read out of that race. I mean, he put away the pacemaker in hand. He faced no true threats in the lane. And as Bill mentioned, it was only against 3 other rivals. All of them were recent maiden breakers like Boyd himself. Going 5.5 furlongs over the summer at Del Mar, he ran a 92 buyer. He regressed a little bit back to 85. I guess I'll throw a question out to Randy. Is some of the speed figures for Saturday at Churchill came back a touch, and I'm not as dialed into the numbers as you guys who make the figures, but some of the numbers came back a touch lower than I expected. Was that because the track was considered to be playing overly fast that day?
Yes, but, these are 2-year-olds who are improving. So a case can be made that maybe some of those numbers could be a little bit higher. We'll be watching those horses as they run back and make some adjustments if necessary. But I tend to look at Boyd's race in the Ed Brown as pretty much the same kind of race that he ran when he broke his maiden at Del Mar back in September. To me, the fact that he was shipped across the country to run at 6.5 furlongs, and he's out of a street boss mare, a Taste of Red, who was unraced, so you don't really get much pedigree-wise as to his distance capabilities. But it kind of would seem to me that for now, at least, Baffert has Boyd penciled in as more of a 1-turn horse than a 2-turn horse, but I could be wrong about that.
All right, so let's continue with the card Saturday at Churchill Downs. And I think the most interesting race on the card was the Kentucky Jockey Club. For the simple reason was Further Ado, coming off that spectacular 20-length win, breaking his maiden in his 3rd lifetime start. He struggled a little bit before that. Kind of an acid test for him. We're going to hear from Brad Cox next in our Gainesway Guest of the Week segment. He can fill us in more about what he has planned for this horse in 2026. To me, the race was not nearly as electrifying as his maiden win, but you couldn't expect it to be. I mean, this was a big jump up in class from maidens into a grade 2 stakes race, which generally draws pretty tough field of horses. But I think he took a step forward just in the fact that he was professional and he won. I don't know if he's as good as his stablemate, Ted Nafi, but nonetheless, this is a horse right now that I think, is in the top 5, I would say, in my opinion, anybody's early list for next year's Triple Crown. Randy?
Really? Okay.
You don't agree with that, huh?
You're much more impressed with that race than I am. I don't think he's in the same category at all at this point as Ted Nafi. When you look at the card at Churchill Downs on the day of the Kentucky Jockey Club, the racetrack didn't seem to get, any faster or slower as the day progressed. It looked like your standard dirt racetrack. I mean, there was a field of maidens a few races earlier, 3 races earlier, same distance, 1 mile and a 16th, right? Further Ado goes 1 mile and a 16th in 143.33. Those maidens, Liberty National wins it by 4 lengths, ran only 0.08 of a second slower. And these are maidens. There was another maiden race earlier on the card, first race, that went 143.99. A fairly weak bunch of 2-year-old fillies in the goldenrod, right? Just 1 race later, went 143.50. Now, I know time is not everything, but buyer speed figure 81, and that's a legitimate buyer speed figure for that day. I think he regressed significantly from that maiden win, and right now, I thought it was a workmanlike win. I like the second place horse, honestly, better than Further Ado. If I'm going to be putting horses in a top 10 Kentucky Derby and any of them are going to come out of this race, to me, it would be Universe, the runner-up trained by Kenny McPeak, who came flying at the end, probably galloped out 8 lengths ahead of Further Ado. He was eating up ground at the end. But I thought it was a pretty lackluster race overall.
Yeah, I thought for Further Ado, I mean, it's his first time against winners. He sat a nice stalking trip in 4th. He was a couple of lengths behind the speed. I thought, again, much as we talked about magnitude in the Clark, I thought just sizing them up as they came around into the 3/8 pole area, I thought Further Ado was going to blow by Soldier and Diplomat. Soldier and Diplomat forced the early issue. He withstood the challenge from Further Ado, and he stuck around as well as he could late into the lane. I think that's a sneaky good effort from him, but Further Ado really had to work for his victory. And, Randy, you basically were looking at my cheat sheet here on Universe, the Kenny McPeak colt. He was the beaten favorite in the Street Sense Stakes at Churchill Downs last month. He was way out of it early. He was hooked 3 wide in the first turn, floated out to the 6 path at the top of the lane. And he was, if you were watching the pan shot, he was out of the picture. And then all of a sudden he dove down to the rail, was making up ground. He pipped Soldier and Diplomat for that place photo. And as you said, he galloped out way ahead of the other horses. And I definitely have him marked to look at next time out. But I think the race in general, even though it numbers wise, yes, it is an obvious regression. I think the winner Further, you don't see a horse win a graded stakes and drop 17 points on the Beyer scale too often. But I think the visuals to me tell a little bit more than the numbers.
Here's another opinion for you. Saturday at Churchill Downs, the best 2-year-old that ran all day, I think even better than Universe or Further Ado, was a maiden that won also for trainer Brad Cox, who we'll be talking to here shortly. In the last race on the card, it was a horse by the name of Cannoneer, a $1.75 million yearling. Bred by Stone Street. Stone Street bought back into Cannoneer along with Vinnie Viola, a St. Elias stable. This is a horse now that wins by 7 1/4 lengths. All right, runs a Beyer of 89 that could have actually been a little bit faster than that. Cannoneer also has the pedigree to go with it. He's a half to Midnight Bourbon, who won $3.6 million in his career, known more for his second and third place finishes than his wins. He's a half to Gervin, who won the Haskell. He's a half to 2 other graded stakes winners, or Cocked and Loaded and Pirate's Punch. And he's by Into Mischief, a better sire than any of those horses than the mare Catch the Moon was bred to. So I thought it was a fantastic debut for Cannoneer, and I can't wait to talk to Brad Cox about that one, because I thought, if you didn't know anything about the horses, you're watching them, Cannoneer was solidly a better horse Saturday than Further Ado.
TD, let me throw that back to you. You will be doing, again, the TDN top 10 or top 20 or what? I'm sorry, I don't recall exactly at the moment how many you do. You do a lot, though. Countdown to the Kentucky Derby. I know you're not going to do your first one for several weeks, probably in January. But I also know that you put a lot of thought into this. If you had to do it today, the question that I raised to Randy, does he belong in your top 5? Do you think you would put him in there? Or maybe would he drop down a little further than that?
I have been trying to piece it together. We are on target to come out with the top 12 on the first Tuesday of January, and I would say he's within the first half dozen or so. I generally at this time of the year, I'm inclined to think that the horses who are going to show up in or near the winner's circle on the first Saturday in May, we might not have seen yet. So, one thing I always try to do is I try to be the iconoclast wise guy. And I am looking for somebody to put in the number 1 slot other than Ted Noffey, even though I'm very impressed with the presumptive 2-year-old champion and what he's done so far at 1 1/16 against some smaller fields and some limited competition. I have a tough time putting those types of horses in the number 1 slot just because of the abysmally poor historical record going back 40 plus years of Breeders' Cup juvenile winners repeating in the Kentucky Derby. It simply doesn't happen with enough frequency. It happens with enough frequency to be an anti-stat, in my opinion. So I don't think Further Ado is going to get the number 1 spot, but we'll be talking about the horse who I think could break into the top 3 once we talk about the Remsen later on in the show.
Okay. Interesting. I look forward to hearing what you have to say about that. All right, let's turn our attention now to Del Mar, where they had that annual turf festival, which once again, I'll give you the winners in the Hollywood Derby in the grade 1s was won by Salamis. And then the Matriarch, the other grade one, was run by Sagesta. Very interesting that they're half sisters to one another for Juddmonte Farms. And of course, they're trained by Chad Brown. And once again, the story was not necessarily the horses. It was the Chad Brown show, as it has so often been during these races at Del Mar. He ran 3 horses in there, won all 3 of them, including, as I mentioned, the 2 grade 1 races. His Matriarch win was his 7th win in that race overall. He needs 1 more to catch up to his former boss, Bobby Frankel, to tie Frankel for the most wins in the Matriarch. And with his win in the Hollywood Derby, that was his 5th, past Charlie Whittingham for all time. Another Randy Moss down the rabbit hole stat that I like is that, his winning percentage at Del Mar is actually fairly modest, considering, that he's generally in the 25-26% range over the year. He's winning 22%, but he's 22 for 105 over his course of his career at Del Mar. But what is amazing to me is all 22 of those winners are graded stakes winner, not even allowance winner or maiden winner among the bunch. 22 graded stakes winners, Randy. And again, pick this conversation up wherever you'd like. But, when we were setting up, you made an interesting point that it was also still another example of the East Coast turf horses are just simply better than the West Coast turf horses.
Yeah, the East Coast turf horses are dominant over the West Coast turf horses, in similar to how the European turf horses are dominant to the Americans, right? It's just kind of it goes down the ladder there. And the bottom of the pecking order, for whatever reason, are the West Coast turf horses. I don't know exactly why that would be. We know that Bob Baffert is the 300-pound gorilla in the room in Southern California, who's dominated that circuit more than any trainer has dominated any major circuit in my lifetime. And Baffert, of course, is predominantly a dirt trainer, not turf. Maybe that has something to do with it. But Chad Brown in particular, as you pointed out, has turned Del Mar and turned these races into his personal playground. I think part of the attraction of the Matriarch is just the fact that Chad's mentor, Bobby Frankel, loved that race so much back when it was run at the old Hollywood Park. And so Chad began targeting the Matriarch in the mid-20 teens. He lost with the first 7 horses he ran in the race. And now, of course, he's won 7 of the last 9 runnings, and he's been beaten a neck and a nose, or he would have actually had 9 wins in the Matriarch. Juddmonte, by the way, has won it 8 times themselves, mostly with Frankel, but now also with Chad Brown. And it's, just a testament to the Juddmonte breeding program that, as you pointed out, Salamis is a half brother to Sagesta, and they both come out of the mare Antono that won the Just a Game at Belmont Park for Chad Brown. So Chad's very familiar with that entire family.
And they both had similar trips. Salamis sat in 4th, stalked outside off the pace. Umberto Rispoli had a decision to make at the top of the lane. Does he try and come through traffic or go wide? He went wide, and it looked like the smart move because that was the clearest path, and there was a little bit of traffic down along the inside. I do have to say, every time I see this horse's name in print or in a headline, I know it's Salamis is named for an ancient city on the island of Cyprus, but I think salamis every time I see this horse. And I'm sure that was not the intention when Juddmonte named this horse. Sagesta had a similar trip tracking the action in 4th, but her run was far more powerful, and she hit clear late with what looked like much more left in the tank.
And Sagesta was clearly the best horse. You can make the case in the Hollywood Derby the Test Score might have been the best horse. He was side by side with Salamis basically the entire race. And as you pointed out, Sagesta had an outside trip, and Test Score kind of tried to work his way through traffic. I can't say conclusively that Test Score was the best horse, but he might have been.
All right, so that's wraps up our wrap-up of the weekend stakes. We're going to take a little break. We're going to hear from Keeneland. We come back, Mr. Brad Cox, a man who has been in the news of late, as we mentioned, will be our Gainesway guest of the week. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by Keeneland. It's the start that sets you apart, the marketplace that drives results. The Keeneland January Horses of All Ages sale begins Monday, January 12th with a mix of short yearlings plus racing and broodmare prospects. Uniquely positioned to get your 2026 off to a fast start. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
We do this so your granddaughter can work on a farm someday. So the stands will still be packed in 50 years. That's why we come to work every day, obsess over every single detail. Because the story of racing is written one moment at a time. And the future of our industry deserves nothing less. Keeneland, every moment matters.
The fastest horse of the week brought to you by the Fast Sires at Windstar Farm. And one of those fast sires we've talked about in the past, Independence Hall, celebrated his first stakes winner this week. That was Glorious Boy, who won the Pulpit Stakes at Gulfstream Park. Dead heated, actually, in the Pulpit with Bronze Bullet before he was declared the sole winner when Bronze Bullet was disqualified. You don't see that combination very often. Independence Hall has had 5 black type horses, 2 graded stakes horses, and 1 grade 1 stakes horse. Independence Hall, of course, was an undefeated stakes winning juvenile, a stakes winner at 2, 3, and 4 from 6.5 to 9 furlongs. And Independence Hall stands at Windstar for a fee of only $10,000. Our fastest horse of the week we have already talked about. It was Magnitude in the Clark. Not his career high buyer speed figure. He had a couple of big ones, obviously, at the fairgrounds earlier this year and then a little bit later when he made his comeback this summer. But in the Clark, Magnitude recorded an official buyer speed figure of 100, and that's the fastest of the week.
Now we welcome in the Gainesway guest of the week. It's Brad Cox, who had an important winner over the weekend in the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes, as we've already discussed here on the TDN Writers Room podcast. That was Further Ado. And Brad, our team has already kind of gone over the race, and I had talked to you beforehand, and you had admitted that even after he won by 20 in his maiden, and just an electrifying performance, that you thought winning the Kentucky Jockey Club was a big test for him. Now, he wasn't nearly as impressive in this time, but how could he be? He was going from a maiden race to a grade 2 stakes race. What did you think about the race? And did he, in fact, pass the test that you had wanted him to pass?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it's a pretty hot pace in there. He set right behind him and, wide around the far turn and, got, it was a dogfight down the lane, and he ended up, length and I think 3/4 winner, and big effort. I thought it was a good effort from a horse that's first time facing winners. That means a lot. I've always said that's one of the probably toughest things to do in racing is after you break your maiden, immediately go after winners. And yes, they are young horses, but there were horses that had broke their maiden and faced winners. Obviously, the horses were second and third and faced winners in their prior starts, and look, it was, once again, a step up, and I thought the performance was a big effort. I mean, look, I know he probably didn't match numbers. He obviously didn't match a buyer number that he ran at Keeneland, but, it was personally, both 2-year-old days we've run the Stars of Tomorrow between opening day of Churchill's fall meet and Saturday. They just didn't give out big figures to any of these 2-year-olds, really, from what I've seen.
So I got 2 questions for you, Brad. First of all, you're all over the place in the winter. I mean, I guess primarily now Florida and New Orleans. Where does this horse go?
We're going to send him to Florida, and that does not mean he'll run in Florida, but, I just feel like with what we have going on down here in the track at pace, and it's been good. It was very good to us last year, and that's where we're going to ship him.
Okay. And I've already expressed the opinion that the best 2-year-old that ran on Saturday at Churchill was not Further Ado, but it was another horse that you train. You know who I'm talking about, Cannoneer, who broke his maiden in the last race of the day. Just incredibly impressive. The way he dealt with a loose horse during the running of the race, the way he drew off the final time, the figure, the pedigree, everything about this horse. What are your thoughts about Cannoneer going forward?
Look, he's very talented. He made the races early in the spring. look, he came out of that race. He just wasn't quite. I just wasn't quite happy with the way he's moving. We gave him the time, and look, I don't know. It could have been something maybe bothering him that day. It just didn't get the performance we were looking for. We backed off of him, gave him the time. Came back into Keeneland 1st of October, and immediately, as soon as we worked him, the talent was still there. It never went anywhere, and I had a pretty good feeling he was going to get ready quick off that break he had this summer, and he did. Obviously, he's a very talented horse. He showed that again. He showed that in his workouts prior to his first start, and he was well bet. Obviously, he was an expensive yearling, but he's still pretty flashy workhorse of the morning, and he put it all together there Saturday evening.
It might be tough to get an allowance race to go. So what are you thinking? What might be next on the calendar?
I don't know. He's another one we're going to ship down here to Florida, and I'm not certain where he'll land, but I would like to gradually stretch him a little bit, maybe whether that's a 1-turn mile or something. I need to let him tell me that he's going to stretch. We got to try to keep him. He can be a little aggressive, but I'm he has improved a good bit throughout the year.
Brad, we're going to fire off and ask you about some other individual horses because you seem to have a barn full or two of them. But before we do, let's step back. You mentioned the horses going to Florida. And last year for TDN, around this time, I interviewed you about your decision to go to Payson Park for the first time for the winter. Last year, you had 50 stalls there. And you had said, it gave you the opportunity to train on dirt without any type of winter weather interruptions. Sure, it might rain, but not to the extent you get the rain, sleet, snow that you might in Hot Springs or even New Orleans. What did you learn off of that last year, and what's your approach this year with Payson Park?
It was a good experience. I mean, our horses came out of here and ran well. We had horses running California last winter. They didn't win, but they ran well. Obviously, Dubai World Cup with HISA. He trained here all winter. Had horses go to Oakland Fairgrounds, Aqueduct, Gulfstream, and all wins. So, we feel like we can use this as a winter hub and ship wherever we feel like we need to be. It was something we wanted to pursue and come back again this year. And, track's been good. Excited about, what lies ahead here, and excited to, start bringing the good horses down here and, getting them ready for 2026.
So where all are you going to have horses?
Oakland Fairgrounds, Turfway, Payson, and Aqueduct, or Belmont.
Okay.
Brad, one more question about Further Ado. You just mentioned that he's on his way to Payson Park. So you're maybe 50 miles up the road from Palm Beach Downs, where you're well aware of the fact that Spendthrift Farm, the owner of Further Ado, has a pretty nice horse that you might have heard of by the name of Ted Noffey. Now, have you talked to the I'm going to stumble on these names again. Have you talked to Ned Toffee or any of the Spendthrift team about plans or, how you might how these two horses who will both be in Florida, how you're going to keep them apart? And, obviously they don't want to run against each other until you get to the Kentucky Derby, if you're both lucky enough to do that. I know it's a little bit early, but, in general, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, you said it. I mean, we don't want to run them against each other, and I don't think we'll have to. There's plenty of options. Obviously, we'll just get our horse down here, kind of let him train along. And like I said, Saturday, it'd be nice to have 2 runs, earn enough points. And, my experience with this Derby over the last 4 or 5 years is it's tough. It's tough on horses, and you have to be ready to run in these point races to earn points. And then you absolutely have to hope you have enough horse left to be competitive in the Kentucky Derby. So, look, my focus is just zeroing in on Further Ado, making sure he's happy, healthy, and moving well. And, we'll pick out a spot. And obviously, it's not going to be against Ted Noffey. So, like you said, if they were to meet up, I'd have to think it'd be in the Kentucky Derby.
So right now, Brad, I've got the screen up of the Kentucky Derby future wager pool that closed this past weekend. We've seen this before from your stable, but Further Ado is the second individual horse betting choice at 13-1, but also on the list of horses that people were betting on, Commandment, son of Into Mischief, Confessional, by Essential Quality, White Tiger by Constitution, My World, also by Essential Quality, Rancho Santa Fe by Tapit. That's quite a lineup there for 2-year-olds, soon to be 3-year-olds. Which one of those horses are you probably most high on?
I mean, it's a good group. I'm excited to get Confessional back. We had a little bit of a setback with him a week or so ago. Nothing major at all, just a little illness, and he's actually just made it down to Florida. He'll just be in a first level allowance. Not sure when and where. Looking forward to getting him back on the work tab this weekend or next weekend. But look, it's a good group. Rancho Santa Fe, nice 2-turn horse. I think he wants a mile and an eighth and more. I think he showed that at Keeneland in his last run. And by design, I've just kind of pumped the brakes with him a little bit. I didn't want to do too much with him. I want to have him ready for 2026. And he's another one that's down here getting ready. Maybe look at the Smarty Jones with him at Oklahoma. But, overall, good group of horses. Commandment, looking at the Mucho Macho Man, I think it's the 3rd of January for him. Gradually stretch him out. That's a 1-turn mile. And then My World, I think we're pointing for the Jerome at Aqueduct. He's up there in New York and doing well and ran big in the Nashua last time. So once again, good group of horses, long way to go. Obviously the goal's the Kentucky Derby, but we obviously have to be effective in these point races. And once again, good group. But the picture as to who's the best and who be really excited about, a long way to go.
Brad, looking to a horse who's 3 now and about to turn 4 and was a top-rated 3-year-old from last year. In fact, he might have been vying for favoritism in the Kentucky Derby. Tappan Street broke his maiden at Gulfstream, ran second in the Fountain of Youth, won the Florida Derby. In fact, he was the last horse to beat Sovereignty, but he suffered a condylar fracture in his right front just the week before the Derby. He's on the comeback trail. He's had 8 breezes. In fact, 3 of his last 4 have been bullets down at Payson. I had read a report that you might be looking for a prep race for him sometime in December in advance of the Pegasus in January. Where does that stand with Tappan Street, please?
Yeah, that's the plan. He breezed this morning here at Payson. He went great. He physically looks as good as he's ever looked. I mean, he's an amazing looking horse, carries plenty of flesh, big, strong horse. We're looking at the Harlan's Holiday. It's a mile on the 16th. It's 20th of December. It's a logical spot to get him started. And, hopefully, he gets a good trip in there. But, he's obviously likes Gulfstream. I mean, he's 3 starts in his career, and they've all been here. So, looking forward to getting him started and kicking his year off. I mean, obviously, 2026 is our goal and try to get to the Breeders' Cup and some of these grade ones, but he's training really well. Excited about how he's come along this fall.
Brad, taking a look at some other horses that have been in the news lately, Hitcho ran very well in the Clark over the weekend. In fact, before you came on, our friend Randy Moss said he thought he was best in that race with the way the race developed and whatnot. What did you think of the race? And it was obviously against a good field. He did run second and was beaten by a good horse. And also, part 2 of my question, are you looking to send him back to Dubai or maybe Saudi Arabia this year?
I thought the performance was a big effort from him. Like you said, come up just a little short. Needed the mile and a quarter. He needed the Dubai distance is what he needed, not the mile and an eighth. But big effort, just come up a little short. And the plan is to getting back to Dubai. I'd like to get a run or 2 in him before then. Obviously, that's the end of March. He just made it down to Payson this morning. I'm sorry, no, he actually ships tonight. He'll arrive tomorrow. But he's doing really well. He's a horse that hasn't really needed much of a break out of Dubai last year. He just went to quarantine coming to Churchill and went right back into training. And he's just a really tough horse that thrives from training and racing. And I think he's made 23 starts now and I think 11 wins and just a really nice career. He's obviously earned a good bit of money, and the goal is to get back to Dubai.
Yeah, he's earned $8.9 million. Can you believe we got you on here for 10 or 15 minutes and never even mentioned Hit Show until now? Is he like the most underrated horse in America right now? Because he doesn't seem to get the credit that his career record would warrant.
I mean, maybe so. I feel like we've managed him well. We just don't go grade one after grade one after grade one. It's all about trying to like get the right spots for him and just, letting him, I guess we could have run the Breeders' Cup Classic. I'm not certain where we would have finished, but I thought it made more sense to run him at Keeneland, and that resulted in a win. And, the plan was, as long as he came out of it, show up in the Clark. And he showed up in the Clark, second best, ran a great race, but just second best. And, would try to pick a spot out that makes sense for him and, try to get him back to Dubai. So, it probably won't be a grade one before the Dubai. I'm not certain, probably won't go the Santa Anita route like we did last year, but, we'll let him tell us. And, he's, like I said, just very durable horse, really nice horse to be around.
So you're very realistic about him, right? Are the Wathenen people okay with, are they as realistic about Hit Show and his abilities as you are?
Yeah, look, I mean, he is a grade one winner, and he's, he ran some really good races as a 3-year-old. I thought his Kentucky Derby was really, really good. Obviously won the Withers, was beaten in the Wood by a nose. So yeah, I mean, they're realistic. They've, obviously that was a major accomplishment with the Dubai World Cup. And that's part of that team's goals, to be competitive in those races in the Middle East. And, that was like, it for them. And obviously I think they want to, be competitive in Riyadh as well with the Saudi Cup. Not certain. Hit Show's the 1 1/8 1-turn horse. I think he's more of a 2-turn 1 1/4 horse. That's, and that's what the World Cup is, or Dubai World Cup is. And that's what we're pointing for.
Well, I'll give one more question before we let you go. Tell us about Bishop's Bay, how he's coming up to the Cigar Mile on Saturday. And again, a horse that is, as I mentioned earlier, again, he's not one of the big stars in your barn, but nonetheless, he's 8 for 12 lifetime, 3 for 3 at the distance, 2 for 2 at Aqueduct. So there's a lot to be said about him. What are your thoughts about him coming into the big race on Saturday at Aqueduct?
I love the draw. I thought he drew really well. The outside post, should give Flavia an opportunity to break and either take control of the race or set off 1 or 2. But once again, another horse I feel like we've kind of campaigned well, managed properly, and new ownership group. And the goal is to get him to the Middle East at some point. And I think a big performance on Saturday could definitely, moving forward, get his rating up high enough to maybe take a chance in a race in the Middle East.
Terrific.
I got one
Brad,
more question for you.
Okay,
Brad.
you got another question, man?
Yeah, I got one more question for you. This is like looking at the Cox stable from 35,000 feet. I know that's a cliche. So you've got horses in Florida. You will have horses in Florida, Louisiana, Oaklawn, Turfway, Aqueduct, or Belmont. How many horses total, roughly?
Probably 160.
How do you do it? How does a guy like you or Todd Fletcher or Jeb or whatever?
There's guys with more horses than me.
But it's so many different locations, right? What is your normal morning like to try to keep up with all this?
I try, wherever I am, I try to go through, obviously, training there, check legs, watch training, delegate, walk around the barn a little bit, and then, pretty much go in the office and, sit down, and you've got about an hour and a half, 2 hours where you're just going through, each horse with each assistant, and obviously not just what they're doing, but, mapping out a game plan in regards to races. And then jock agents. It's a lot. I try to enter all my horses, try to talk to the jock agents or text with them and make sure everybody's ready and ready to go, and it's all organized. I mean, it's a lot, but I mean, days like Saturdays while we do it, I mean, to be in a spot to succeed and have good horses and make it happen.
Have you always had a knack for organization, or is this something that you've had to perfect as time has gone on?
I don't know. To me, it's like organized chaos. I mean, there's times where it's a lot, but I mean, look, I think, sometimes you just got to step away, take a deep breath, walk away from it, and then, just go back at it. And, look, when I'm away from it, I really miss it. I will tell you that. There's times where you do get a little, I would maybe burn out or tired, but I tell you, when you're away from it for a day or two, in my case, I mean, I really miss it. I love what I do. And, I hope it shows. I mean, got to, once again, great team in place, great assistance at all these locations, and it really works out well.
Very good. Well, Brad, thanks again, and congratulations on the big win in the Kentucky Jockey Club with further ado. And good luck this weekend with Bishop's Bay and the Cigar. And thanks for filling in on, what was that, Randy, about 9 horses he had on the Kentucky
a lot. It's a lot. It's a good problem to have.
Good,
We're talking about him in April. Not
okay,
December.
I'm sure we will. Once again, thanks for being our Gainesway guest of the week, Brad Cox, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Okay.
And this week's guest of the week, Brad Cox, came to you courtesy of Gainesway, home of the Grade 1 winning millionaire Tapit Trice. The son of Tapit is out of a half-sister to champion Jaywalk and was a $1.3 million yearling. He scored triple-digit buyers on 3 different occasions. Tapit Trice earned over $1.8 million, and his first crop of foals will be born spring of 2026. Tapit Trice stands at Gainesway for a fee of $10,000.
Here comes that big gray Tapit Trice right down the outside.
Tapit Trice wins the Toyota Bluegrass. Tapit Trice's 2024 debut was awesome. Tapit Trice is lunging. Tapit Trice wins the Woodward.
Well, some of the news of the week involved some not very good news, in fact, for the sport. And of course, that includes the sad news that Rags to Riches passed away at age 21, which we'll get to in a minute. But TD, I'm going to ask you to kind of lead the team in this story because you covered it for the TDN and as usual did a very thorough job. But Rudy Rodriguez was served with, quote, notice of violations and show cause for alleged violations of animal cruelty since November 24th. 15 covered horses under his care have wound up on the vets list. 4 horses have had catastrophic injuries. Take it away and give us your thoughts on the Rudy situation and what you learned from reporting on the story.
Yeah, this came out the day before Thanksgiving, and this was a charge from HISA that I've not seen utilized before by them, at least certainly not to this scale. 15 horses went on the vets list roughly over the past year for Mr. Rodriguez, and HISA had pointed out that they did not have the required follow-up diagnostics. So if you go on the vets list, you have to satisfy certain conditions, and they have to be entered according to the HISA protocol into the database so they know what's happening. Following up on horses that do go on the vets list is important for HISA. And he's also had 4 catastrophic injuries roughly within that same time period. The notice of violation from HISA used phrases such as imminent danger. They gave Mr. Rodriguez 72 hours to produce evidence of what happened to these horses. Why weren't they entered in the database, the ones that were on the vets list? And he's facing a possible license suspension. HISA in the notice also reference other penalties that might happen further down the road if the charges are proven true. I could not reach Rudy Rodriguez. He didn't return phone calls or text messages last Wednesday. TDN did speak to his attorney, who defended Rodriguez, said he's an excellent caregiver, professed for his love of horses, and explained the situation by saying, well, some of the horses were claimed away from Rudy Rodriguez and some were retired. Others, however, ended up running at Mountaineer Park in West Virginia, a jurisdiction that is not under the auspices of HISA because of an ongoing years-long court battle. And the HISA rules are, at the moment, under an injunction not to be enforced in the state of West Virginia. So they showed up with Rudy Rodriguez still listed as the owner, but another trainer who has kind of a checkered past, Juan Vasquez, listed as the trainer of record. So Mr. Rodriguez's trainer said they'd be following up with the proper protocols. They'd be filing to get a hearing so they can have their side of the story known. I have a feeling that this, I don't know which way this is going to go, but I have a feeling like most of these HISA charges that involve things that are fairly serious, it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, and we probably won't know the final adjudication for quite some time. I'd imagine about a year from now.
TD, I have a follow-up question for you. Again, you said I agree with you. This particular way they handled this with this notice of violation was something that seems to be a little bit different course of action. If they're alleging that if it is proven or the allegations are very serious, why not a summary suspension right now? He's still out there running horses. I believe he had 3 in at Aqueduct on Saturday. Why would they take this course of action, with people that have had a lot less serious charges or allegations levied against them? They have put them on the sidelines almost immediately.
Yeah, I don't know the definitive answer to that. The HISA authority did not want to comment for our story that we ran last Wednesday. They basically said that, we've outlined the charges and that's all we're going to say for now. Maybe an educated guess is that HISA has faced some pressure for being a little too quick to pull the trigger on suspending trainers, and maybe they're trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. That's my speculation. I don't know that for sure, but in any time you run into these types of situations, you run into the argument of, you have some people saying, why don't we kick these guys to the curb? We have some people saying, hey, let's let the process play out. Let's let these people have their due diligence and their time to have their say in an administrative hearing or some sort of an appeal. So the answer is, I don't know. And I just think it's going to take a long time before we get a resolution.
Yeah, I only have one issue with this. And look, I'm all for what HISA is trying to do. I'm pro HISA, as you guys know. I like the fact that they're putting trainers under a microscope like this for the good of the horses. Here's my only issue. I mean, this is a devastating charge against Rudy Rodriguez. It's going to be hugely damaging to Rodriguez's business. If they're giving him 72 hours to give an explanation, why is this all not done behind the scenes? I'm all for transparency, but why can't this be done privately and not publicly? And then once Rodriguez responds, if it doesn't meet the criteria for HISA, if he doesn't adequately explain the issues and he's going to be suspended by HISA, then come out with it, then announce it. Suppose Rodriguez comes out and has explanations, due process, innocent until proven guilty, has explanations for everything that happened that at least will mostly satisfy HISA. And he's still tarred publicly by these accusations. I mean, is that fair, TD? You'd really have to unravel a very large knot to say whether HISA is fair in their processes or not. You're going to get people who argue that it isn't, and you're going to get people who argue that they're definitely fair. And because I have to report on these issues, I try not to come down with an opinion one way or the other. So it's, there are different ways they could have handled it. I mean, maybe they're under some pressure to have a big quote unquote get on their side for somebody that they're going after that's had some alleged violations, and maybe they want the publicity for that. I don't really know what the deal is. There's myriad ways you could handle it, and this was the way they handled it.
All right, so let's move on. As I mentioned earlier, during the week, Rags to Riches, the 2007 Belmont winner, passed away at the age of 21. Her accomplishments mainly revolve around, well, I shouldn't even say that. She had a lot of accomplishments. She won the 2007 Belmont Stakes over Curlin, only the third filly ever to win the Belmont and the first in 102 years. I guess, it's a lot of people think she should be in the Hall of Fame and have brought up that question. I have never voted for her, and I doubt I will vote for her in the future. I believe she's been on the ballot several years, and I expect she probably will be for years to come. And my knock on her is that she had a very brief career. She only ran 7 times. She was sidelined after the Gazelle, which was her first start after the Belmont. She had a pastern problem, suffered a hairline fracture, never recovered from that. They were intending to run her at 4, but it didn't work out. But I'm also going to sort of think a little bit differently, and maybe I will give a second thought to this, because the Hall of Fame and the criteria to getting in, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have dreamt of voting for a horse under any circumstances that only ran 7 times. But the game has obviously changed so much and so radically with these horses having short careers. And a precedent is going to be set when Justify is elected into the Hall of Fame, whenever that's probably coming up pretty soon, with only 6 lifetime starts. And I think Flightline also with 6 lifetime starts is an absolute cinch to be voted into the Hall of Fame as well. So, maybe this 7 number isn't so bad after all. TD?
Yeah, I would say that, and I'll preface my remarks by saying I don't vote for things like the Hall of Fame or the Eclipse Awards. And I understand there are people who really obsess over who's in the Hall of Fame and who isn't, and I respect that. It's just not my thing. So when we came up with the show format here, and one of the questions on our list was debate over whether she's in the Hall of Fame or not, my first reaction was, oh, I thought she was in the Hall of Fame. But I can see your point there, where she's only had 7 starts, and she was the first filly to win the Belmont Stakes in the span of 102 years when she accomplished that in 2007. Were her wins, she had 3 other Grade 1 wins. She won the Las Virgenes, the Santa Anita Oaks, and the Kentucky Oaks, all in succession before she went to the Belmont Stakes. And it wasn't as if, let's go into the Wayback Machine here and remember what happened 18 years ago. It wasn't as if coming out of winning the Kentucky Oaks that Todd Pletcher said, we're going to the Belmont Stakes. Rags to Riches, I'm not going to say she was an afterthought for that race, but she was a very late consideration. That was a loaded year for the Triple Crown, in my opinion. Street Sense won the Derby. Hard Spun was in there. Curlin had won the Preakness. And, I think Todd Pletcher only opted to go into the Belmont Stakes when Street Sense defected from running in the third leg of the Triple Crown. Rags to Riches regular jockey Garrett Gomez was already committed to Hard Spun in that race. And Johnny Velasquez, Todd Pletcher's main rider, had another commitment in the race that he had to be released from to get on Rags to Riches. And the race itself was certainly a tour de force. She stumbled at the start. She swooped in 4 wide at the head of the stretch. She went shoulder to shoulder with Curlin, who was trying to knock her off stride and into second place there, but she prevailed. And that was also for Todd Pletcher. That got the monkey off his back. He was 0 for 28. He had not won a Triple Crown race prior to that. And, that was his first Triple Crown score. Rags to Riches, she had some issues with her pastern after that. She had some time off. She came back. She ran second in the Gazelle at Belmont Park. They tried to bring her back at age 4, but that didn't work because she had some additional pastern problems. So it's one of those deals where I think you're right. We are going to have to, voters moving forward are going to have to take that short career span of only 7 races and take it into consideration for horses from this era in the 21st century, because I think that's more and more going to be the racing norm.
Yeah. I mean, like Bill, I also vote for Hall of Fame. And it's not that I would say to somebody who voted for Rags to Riches to be in the Hall of Fame, you're wrong. You shouldn't have voted for her. I mean, you're just wrong. I would never say that, because I think it's debatable. I didn't vote for her because of the reasons that Bill outlined. 7 lifetime starts, 5 wins. She lost her debut. She lost her final start, but in between she had that win streak that TD talked about. She beat Curlin in the Belmont, hell of a race. But because of that short body of work, I couldn't vote for her for the Hall of Fame, and I won't be voting for her for the Hall of Fame. I may be wrong, but that's the way I feel. And I think horses like, well, for example, Smarty Jones. There was controversy about Smarty Jones being voted into the Hall of Fame. He had 9 starts, and that was too few for some Hall of Fame voters. He won 8 of his 9 starts, lost only in the Belmont Stakes. Justify, Flightline, to me, I'll vote for both of those, but those are notable exceptions, right? Justify sweeps the Triple Crown. Flightline was the most talented horse that I've seen in America since Secretariat. That, to me, those should be exceptions, but I mean, that's why I didn't vote for Rags to Riches.
All right. So there was a big story. Well, I thought it was a big story anyways at Delta Downs this weekend. I'm surprised that the I covered it for the TDN, and in Monday's TDN, I have a wrap up on how their experiment with reducing the takeout on all bets to 10% on Tuesday and Wednesday went. I'm surprised the other trade publications didn't pick up on this, because I thought it was a big story for a number of reasons. First of all, it's so nice to see somebody at least trying to give the horse players a break, especially in an era where the CAW play, in my opinion, is a something that could literally wreck the sport and is driving players out of the game. They need a break, and someone came through. So I was very curious how this would all work out. And afterwards, it was very hard to come to any conclusions because Tuesday they were up 38.6% over the comparable figures in 2024. On Wednesday, they were down 15.6%. So they had a great day Tuesday and not so great Wednesday. There's a couple reasons why, which maybe I'll get into after I throw it to TD and Randy. But the villain in this story is TD's favorite gaming operator, Churchill Downs. And I get a smile on his face because he always refers to them as the gaming company in his coverage in TDN. Twin Spires, owned by Churchill Downs, refused to take the signal. Now, the reason would be with such a low takeout, that's going to cut into their profit margins, but all the other major ADWs took it. And, I think Twin Spires didn't do right by the fan there. And again, Churchill has a long history of doing things that aren't necessarily good for the game. So, Randy, did you play Delta on Tuesday and Thursday?
I didn't even know about it, Bill.
Oh, my goodness.
I wish I had. I might have given Delta a little extra attention. I love it. I am very skeptical that other tracks are going to look at it and use it as a business model. I mean, quite frankly, the entire horse racing industry should have gone to this 30 years ago. They didn't then because they were too short-sighted, right? They didn't want to look ahead. They were more concerned about short-term profits than long-term health of the industry. I mean, how many times have we talked about that? And I don't have any optimism that it's going to take in the future because of the CAWs. So I think it's an interesting experiment. It doesn't surprise me at all that it was quasi-successful and could have been very successful with a little help from Twin Spires. I love that it happened, but I think it's just going to be one of these one-off things that might happen occasionally instead of something that that'll be lasting and that will be something other tracks would emulate.
Yeah, I mean, 2 racing cards for any type of experiment is too small a sample size to give you the full picture. I mean, if they had blown it out of the water on both days with increases in handle, were they going to immediately pick up and start slashing their takeout to 10% for all of their dates if it worked for those 2? I mean, but as Bill mentioned, there were a couple of things having to do with the competition. Tuesday, the first time they tried it was a relatively light day on the national simulcast calendar. Wednesday, a little bit more competition from tracks that are traditionally in the afternoon time slot. Let's not forget that Delta has a niche racing at night, and they switched to afternoon programs for the Tuesday and the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So they were a little out of their element as far as when people are used to seeing them on their simulcast screen. And as for the Churchill Downs Incorporated's decision not to have Twin Spires take the bets, I think it just underscores that, unfortunately, every time that gaming corporation has an opportunity to prove it's the 900-pound gorilla, it does. And I think it's unfortunate. And for Delta Downs, I mean, they might have lost money too on the deal, but at least they reap the benefit of good publicity saying, hey, we're trying and we're trying something different. And let's see if it works. And, maybe there are some other ADWs who were able to sign up some customers, some smaller ADWs who benefited from customers wanting to bet Delta and the low takeout being shut out of Twin Spires. Maybe some other people signed up with those smaller ADWs. But, it's a little too small of a sample size to get a good handle on it for the handle for me.
Well, I played Delta on Tuesday and Wednesday, but apparently on Wednesday I didn't bet enough to get their figures up over 2024. But that was a good point you made, TD. I think one of the mitigating factors was the daytime cards, opposed to the nighttime cards. So it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison. And Churchill Downs was ironically, Churchill Downs was the main signal on Wednesday that they didn't have to worry about on Tuesday. And I'm sure low takeout or not, bettors were obviously a lot more inclined to bet on Churchill Downs than Delta Downs. But anyways, I commend them for trying something. I hope they try it again. And I hope that in the future, horse players will respond even better than they did this year. So we're going to take another break, and we're going to hear from the Pennsylvania bred program as well as First TV. When we come back, we will go over this weekend's top races at Aqueduct. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The first two of the four Pennsylvania bred 2-year-old stakes that will close out 2025 were run at Parks last Wednesday. Congratulations to the Ed Bussinger bred Divine Intentions, who led wire to wire, held on to win the Shamrock Rose Stakes, $100,000 race. Congrats also goes out to Cassius King and LC Racing's Milata, who went wire to wire and won by 3.5 lengths in the $100,000 Nursery Stakes. That same day at Parks, the Westerly farm bred Maximus Meridius won his second open company black type race of 2025. He took the Let's Give Thanks Stakes. The last two 2-year-old stakes now for this year will be run on December the 30th. To find out how you can become a part of this lucrative Pennsylvania program, which has paid out $27.5 million annually on average over the last 13 years, just go to www.pabred.com or call Brian Sanfratello, 610-444-1050.
The Pennsylvania breeding program is the best program in the country. The Stallion Awards, the owner bonuses, also the restricted races and the stakes races for Pennsylvania breds. This year, 8 breeders are on track to earn over $200,000 in breeders' awards, and 2 could hit the $1 million mark. We have the best program in the country. Take advantage of the fantastic program that we have.
Learn more at pabred.com.
Be a smarter bettor with First TV, the best horses, with thousands of exclusive morning workouts, all at your fingertips and delivered right into your inbox. Everything you need to be informed. Be smart, bet smart with First TV.
The work of the week is brought to you by First TV. Remember representing? He's the son of Curlin and Beholder, who topped the 2023 Fasig-Tipton Saratoga yearling sale with a bid of $4 million from owner Amir Zaidan. Representing continues to work toward his debut for trainer Bob Baffert. He worked 4 times in October, and this here that we're showing you right now is his 4th work for the month of November, his fastest yet. Representing is the chestnut on the inside, and he worked a bullet 58 2/5 from the gate for 5 furlongs, the fastest of 27 works at that distance on that day. Baffert said Representing's debut is yet to be determined, but should come before the end of January.
Well, the last big hurrah of horse racing with graded stakes races, for the most part, will take place this weekend at Aqueduct, with several graded stakes races on the card, including 2 that are usually pretty good races and draw a lot of attention. The Remsen for 2-year-old colts, perhaps there's a future Derby winner in there, and the Cigar Mile Handicap, which unfortunately is a race that seems to get worse and worse every year. This is not a very good field. It's now down to a grade 2. And I think this, I wouldn't downgrade it to a 3, but this is more like a grade 3 field. Also like to mention that we're recording this on Monday. So as I think everybody knows, on Sunday, the jockeys staged a walkout at Aqueduct over several issues, the latest of which was that Naira asked the assistant clerk of scales to, quote unquote, go home after they had a disagreement with him about some of his duties. They didn't fire him, but it was certainly a penalty because he balked at doing some additional work. So we have no idea at this point what's going to happen down the road. I would think that they would work very hard to get that situation settled before Saturday, but whether or not they race on Thursday, which would be the next day of racing, that remains to be seen. I know both the Jockeys Guild and NYRA management are working on that as we speak, to try to resolve this situation. So, let's stay tuned to that and see what happens. Okay, the Remsen Stakes came up okay, maybe not as strong as possible. TD, was it you that said that you had a horse in the Remsen that you were a little excited about?
Yes, I've been waiting to see this Danny Gargan trainee called Talkin. And Talkin, he beat Further Ado in his career debut at the tail end of the Spa meeting. And then Danny Gargan raced him in the Champagne, the grade 1 turn mile stakes at Aqueduct in October. And the chart caller's short comment in that race was 7 wide upper stretch, mild kick. I thought he had a very eventful and overly busy ride that day. He broke from the outermost post. He angled in, leaving the chute. He was bumped back out. Kendrick Carmouche dropped him to the rail on the turn. He did advance, and then he was spun 7 wide at the top of the lane. He was gaining ground, not enough to catch the winner, who won by daylight on that afternoon. And trainer Danny Gargan subsequently said, I normally might have gone to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile off of that race, but he didn't want to ship out to Del Mar. He said if it was in New York or Kentucky, I believe he told this to Dave Grenning of the Forum last week, I would have run if the Breeders' Cup was in Kentucky or New York, but he didn't want to ship out to California because of his perceptions that it's too speed favoring, which kind of turned out to be true this year. And instead, he right away off of that second in the Champagne said, I'm going to point to the Remsen going 9 furlongs first Saturday in December. And here he is. I've been waiting for him. I think this is the horse of the ones that have had limited action that I've been waiting the most to see before I solidify that Derby Top 12 that we'll publish in early January.
Yeah, there's some interesting guys. Todd Pletcher's got 3 in here that are all legitimate horses. There was one maiden race at the Belmont at Aqueduct meet back in October that really stands out, where Renegade and Paladin finished 1-2, and then the order was flip-flopped because of disqualification. But both of those horses ran buyer speed figures of 87. They're both in here, Renegade for Pletcher, Paladin for Chad Brown. They're leading contenders. But another one to keep your eye on is another Pletcher horse by the name of Courting. Courting won a maiden race in November at Aqueduct, 1 turn mile, his second lifetime start. And he is by Curlin out of Cavorting. Stone Street bred him, of course, and he is a full brother to Clairiere, who obviously was a notable fillier mare in her time recently, who was much better around 2 turns than she was around 1 turn. Courting was a $5 million yearling that Stone Street bought back into. Whisper Hill Farm, Mandy Pope is the majority owner. But I just think that Courting is likely to take a step forward around 2 turns at the 1 1/8 of the Remsen, and maybe at a halfway decent price. I don't know.
All right, so Randy, first of all, if anybody's keeping score at home, my pick in the race will be coming out of the maiden race that Randy mentioned, but not Renegade. I'm going to go with Paladin for my good friend Chad Brown. But I want to bring back the issue to Courting. I don't like this horse. Randy, I know that, the pedigree and probably there's likely improvement to come, but I'm a little surprised that you spoke so highly of the horse for the main reason that you're the buyer speed figure guy. And this horse isn't, so far in his career, is not fast enough. 75 and 76 versus several horses in here that ran in the 80s in previous starts. TD's horse, Talking, has run an 84 and 82. And also, keep in mind that last race was not a strong field at all. It was a 4-horse field. The horse went off at 1-5 and, just bullied, really inferior competition. And I think this horse is going to be overbet because of, the hype of the $5 million price and Todd Pletcher and John Velasquez. But what about those figures, Mr. Moss?
No, I agree with most of what you said, Bill. The only way you can play Courting in this race is if you project that the horse is going to improve fairly substantially, not just with experience, but at the 1.125 mile distance as opposed to a 1-turn mile.
All right, so let's move on to the Demoiselle. This only came up with 6 horses. Again, I think this of the major stakes on the weekend, this probably came up the weakest. You have Shilling for Kenny McPeak that won the Tempted Stakes last time out by 4 lengths. Didn't get a very big figure in there, a 65. You have Zany coming in for Todd Pletcher, and Rapoli broke his maiden at Gulfstream, again in a 5-horse field, but did get a 76 buyer. And I'm actually, again, looking at Chad Brown and Flavien Prat here with Concurrently, who hasn't run very fast either, but looks like this horse is improving. And I think the Buy American Pharaoh out of, Midnight Loot on the bottom might not be that good for a distance, but I think this horse will improve with added distance in the 2 turns. But I do the Road to the Kentucky Oaks. I start a little later than TD does. I don't think the winner of this race is going to be number 1 in my road to the TDN Road to the Kentucky Oaks. TD, I'll let you lead off. What did you think of this race?
Tepid, lukewarm opinion for me in a 6-horse field on Todd Pletcher's other filly in here. Todd's won the Demoiselle 4 of the last 5 runnings. I landed on Believable by Curlin out of a Tapit mare. Blinkers On, Johnny Velasquez On is a half to a couple of horses who have done well around 2 turns and at a distance of ground, including Tenfold, who won the Jim Dandy Stakes back in 2018.
All right, so that takes care of the Demoiselle. There's another graded stakes race on the card, the Elite Power, but let's move on to what is considered the highlight of the afternoon, which is the Cigar Handicap for started off as the Naira Mile back, I believe, in 1988 when they had that, ironically, a jockey strike on the day. And I believe either William Fox, I believe, won the race.
Billy Fox.
Yes. They brought in substitute riders to take over for the big guys.
Yes.
Again, like I said, for Cigar Mile, not very impressive of a field. There's 2 horses in here. One we've already discussed with Brad Cox is Bishop's Bay, who is far from one of Cox's big stars, but is 8 for 12 lifetime, 3 for 3 at the distance, and 2 for 2 at Aqueduct. But I have to go with Phileas Fogg, just because this horse has been, I think, running against much better. Won the Suburban, was 3rd in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, 2nd in the Woodward behind Locked, 3rd in the Jockey Club Gold Cup behind Antiquarian, and just a length and a quarter behind Sierra Leone. There's no Locked or Sierra Leones in this race. But a kind of interesting story. A trainer by the name of Gustavo Rodriguez claimed this horse last year at Saratoga for $62,500. And then prior to that, the horse sold for only $55,000 at the yearling sale. So when you look at the Remsen, it looks like every horse in there practically sold for $500,000 or more. This is kind of a rags to riches type horse, and maybe he'll get the biggest win of his career on Saturday in the Cigar Mile. But I got to be quite honest. If I was doing a Road to the Met Mile top 10 for the TDN, I don't think I'd be too interested in any of these horses as big stars down the line in 2026, Randy.
Yeah, you mentioned the history of this race. Billy Fox crossed the picket line way back when and rode 49er to win this race for trainer Woody Stevens. Billy Fox's sister, of course, is well known as the significant other to Dale Romans. In this spot, I love Phileas Fogg. I agree with you totally. Blinkers On. He's already fast enough early. He's capable of running some big races. He's tossed in some really strong efforts. 2nd to Locked last time, but he had triple-digit buyers in the 2 races before that. It's not a strong field. I think Phileas Fogg kind of lays all over these.
This is another race similar to the Demoiselle that Todd Pletcher has dominated. He's won 3 of the last 4 runnings, but does not have an entrant in this year's edition. John Velasquez, as a jockey, has won the last 3 runnings of the Cigar Mile. He's on a bit of a long shot in this race, so I'm kind of flailing around blindly for a pick. I landed on another angle that's done pretty well here. We're already into December, and 3-year-olds historically run pretty well against older horses in this race. In fact, they've won it 3 out of the last 6 years. And the lone 3-year-old in the race is Mika from the barn of Mike Maker. Since transitioning from the turf, this horse has raced twice on the dirt and just aired it out at Delaware and Laurel. Running on the front end, has wired both of those two races by a combined 23.5 lengths. Gets a testing class stepping up here, but as we've mentioned, not exactly, this is not your usual grade 2 field. It's maybe a little bit on the weaker side.
And the TDN Writers Room is always also brought to you by our friends at West Point Thoroughbreds. They've had quite a few good horses to talk about in 2025. Let's talk about a 2-year-old filly we haven't mentioned yet. Her name is She's Country. She's won 2 of her first 3 starts now for trainer George Weaver. She is a New York bred filly from the first and only crop of Combatant. She was acquired by West Point, courtesy of bloodstock agent David and Gordo, who picked her out for $80,000 at OBS April this past spring. So far, She's Country has run on grass. On Saturday, she switches to the main track for the $500,000 Fifth Avenue division of the New York Stallion Stakes. She will be ridden Saturday by Irad Ortiz Jr.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
Well, that is a wrap on this week's show. I want to thank my broadcast partners, Mr. Randy Moss, and thank you, T.D. Thornton, for filling in for Zoe Cadman this week. Also want to thank the people that work behind the scenes and really make this show go and look good when it's presented. And that's Sue Finley, Katie Petroniak, Anthony LaRocca, and Aaliyah LaRocca. Everybody, we're looking forward to Christmas, and it's that time of year. Have a great holiday season. We'll be back with a couple more podcasts before the year is over. And once again, thanks for tuning in, and see you again soon.